We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. Through the unknown remembered gate, when the last of Earth left to discover...
Brian, thank you for coming on the podcast today. I found your YouTube channel about a couple weeks back and I saw that you had your contact info on there. And I was like, I really get behind what this guy is talking about and I really want to get him on the podcast. And you were super cool about getting on. And, we had a couple mishaps with scheduling, but here we are now.
Yeah, good to be here, man. I've actually have a question for you
Yeah,
to start it off. What draws you to podcasting?
that's a good question. I love this. I love this reframing that I'm answering now. Um, I've loved podcasts since around COVID, actually, is whenever I got into them because I was still in high school. And that was whenever I started like consistently working out. And it was just something that I enjoyed listening to while I was doing that because I didn't always want to listen to music. And I've always liked being kind of like in people's conversations, but not always like talking in them. And so that was what drew me to listening to podcasts. And then, like, as the years developed, I think the thought of creating a podcast sort of clicked in my head. I was like, I love writing. I want to be some sort of writer. As I get out of high school here, whether it be film or journalism or something like that. And I love talking to people. And I've always kind of been a little bit socially awkward with talking to people, especially with like some things that I'm interested in. Because, like, whenever I mean, this because this is what a lot of your channel is about. Whenever you're interested in like spiritualism and things like that and mythologies and literature, like you don't always have people who are wanting to talk about that. But then whenever I started this podcast, I kind of had this good excuse where I could say to someone, hey, like, I have this podcast, do you want to come on and just talk about what you do? And that has
Yeah,
seemed to be a really good icebreaker. And so that's kind of what has kept me around with podcasting. This isn't even this is my second podcast I did. The first one was just sort of like a one that I did with two of my friends from high school, and we only made like 5 episodes, and it was just sort of, us having fun and talking about random stuff. And I think that sort of was the spiritual predecessor to this one. This one I do solo, but yeah, I think that's what's drawn me to it. Is I just love talking to people. I love getting to hear people's stories, and I think with this sort of time of the internet that we're in, it's an easy way to say to somebody, "Hey, do you want to talk?" Especially if you've never met before. I think it's a good icebreaker.
yeah, and I like with podcasts that it is a thing where you can just put it on in the background, and then, it's a different type of. There's videos you actively watch. There's stuff like that, and then there's a whole different thing. It's a whole different feeling when you're working on something else, and you got a podcast going in the back. I think you should say your name and then the name of your podcast.
Yeah. So I'm Caleb, and this is Suburban Tongue. It's
Sweet. And this is Ryan Robinson.
um, yeah. So I mean, that's always what's drawn me to it, and I couldn't agree more with you. I think that's I drive a lot because one of my like I have two part-time jobs, and one of them is I just do some door dashing, and so like I'm always in the car, and I found that podcasts are a really good way to like I think simply I could say it's a way to like quote unquote kill time, but I don't like saying it that way because I don't I don't think time is something that needs killed. I think it should be appreciated a little bit more for what it is. And so I like to try to occupy the time that I am spending, here on Earth, learning as much as I can. And I love to find people who are really knowledgeable about something and just kind of dive into a 4 hour long conversation with them. Um, my podcast hasn't reached the 4 hour mark yet, but that is something that I really love. Is it's just a way for people to talk freely for kind of as long as they're wanting to.
Yeah.
So on your end, I kind of wanted to just pick your brain a little bit about some of the things that you've made videos about. Before I get into that, though, do you want to you already introduced yourself with your name, but do you want to tell people what it is that you do?
Sure, yeah. The nature of my work is it's kind of ironic to try to talk about it because it's actually something I talk about a lot is that I talk about things you can't really talk about, or at least that it feels like you can't talk about it. It's a lot of times it's metaphysical. It's reality itself. It's experience itself, and words and speaking is a subset of these realms. It's a lower dimension. There is actually dimensions above the ones in which we can communicate with language, and I feel like kind of my role is to experience these other dimensions, these higher dimensions, and to assimilate some meaning in it and some understanding that I think could be valuable to anyone who's in a similar predicament as myself, that is being a living being incarnated into this specific dimension as a human on planet Earth. And my goal is, hey, there's other people that I think are out there going through this. And I don't think a lot of people really know where they are in the universe. And I think a lot of people, they feel lost and they don't even realize it. So it's kind of my role in this whole game or this whole show that is happening is to be like, hey, like, among the masters, among the ascended, they don't need to reassure each other. They don't need to say, hey, man, everything's okay. Like, this is how it is. They don't need to hear that because they've already experienced it. But then among the average population of, say, the United States in 2025, that is people who could use some reassurance and some external, some eyes that have seen beyond the veil that can say, hey, this is how it is. This is what's happening. You don't have anything to be worried about. And I'd say that's kind of my puzzle piece and where I fit into the picture.
Yeah, there's this Greek a Greek concept that I have always resonated a lot with ever since I first heard about it. It's referred to as the psychopomp, and it's this character in sort of the, like you're saying, the lower dimensions of the Greek mythos, who has, you can think of him sort of like Virgil from Dante's Inferno, where he's sent for the specific purpose of guiding somebody through a very tumultuous time in their life. And the psychopomp is somebody who has had these experiences, and then because of that, they've chosen, in sort of like that Buddhist way of the bodhisattva, to stay here and to help people along the process. And I th- I kind of I see that a lot in what you're doing, and especially now that you've described your reason for doing what you do, um, where it's, you've whatever these experiences are that you've had, they've affected you so greatly that it's like, what else am I supposed to do other than share it with people?
Yeah, I would consider myself kind of a knockoff bodhisattva, or like your bodhisattva from the street corner, you know? And the reason I say that is because I'm not really a traditional bodhisattva in the sense that when I was into a different place, when I had the option, hey, do I want to go back to my body? Do I want to continue that story I was on? For me, it wasn't, my first thought wasn't, well, I got to go help everyone else. Actually, my first thought was more of a selfish one. And I said, I need to know where the story's going to go. I need to know, like, what's going to happen with the character. Like, yes, I find myself helping people and I find myself sharing, but I would say I haven't reached a purest, like the purest state of sharing where it's zero self interest, zero self, like complete selflessness. I definitely have not reached that level, though I have my eyes on it and I intend to grow into it eventually.
Yeah. Um, so something that interests me there with what you're saying is kind of just I'm interested in knowing if you're, willing to share, and however much you're willing to share. What was that experience or set of experiences that led you to realizing that this is kind of what your calling is?
Mm. My calling as what I'm doing with my YouTube channel.
Yeah, like just what you're saying about like when you had the choice to, to come back and to share this with people. What was that that was going on?
Yeah, man, that's like a whole life story, and I'll summarize it because, of course, everything I've experienced in my life is all connected, and it is all connected, and it's all led to everything. So to point out one experience and say that this was really the turning point, though there are certain checkpoints, certain profound moments that I will speak about, but I would say there's always been something in me that was searching for something, reaching for something. And I didn't even know that this is the craziest thing is it was subconscious. I didn't know I was searching for something. I just would find myself reading so many different books and researching all kinds of different things. And what I thought was it was just a pure curiosity, a pure intent in the moment. But now that I look back, I realize I think some part of me remembered that there's something more. And when I say something more, I mean something beyond what I've been told by my society and the way I've been taught to view my own existence and what I am and who I am. And a big turning point for me, you mentioned COVID earlier. You said that's when you started your podcast and you're in high school. That was actually when I was in high school too. I think 10th grade was COVID for me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I was in ninth grade, so we're pretty close there.
yeah, and I remember because since it was at home, I would sit in my room all day, every day for pretty much a whole year because we couldn't go to school. And I remember I'd be sitting in my room, sitting at my chair, and then at one point, I thought about something, and I thought, like, I realized that I'm gonna be dead in 100 years. Like, I just thought about that, and I started like really thinking, like, what does that mean? I'm not gonna be here in 100 years. Like I'm just gonna be gone, just dead. Because from my frame of reference at that time, my human life is everything, and it still is in a way, but it was everything. So the thought of, oh, I'm gonna be dead in 100 years, I was imagining like, what will the world be like? And I realized the world wouldn't change at all. The sun would still rise, the wind would still blow, the ocean would still be there, the people would still be there. They might not even remember me. And I started just kept thinking about that for a long time. It was really weird. It was my first experience of what I think many people call an existential crisis, where I was just sitting there for a whole day straight, just staring at my wall, just thinking about this. And I started getting really depressed. I remember at the time, my family members and my parents, they were like kind of concerned about me because I started acting different. Like I wouldn't be interested in anything. I wouldn't want to eat food or anything. I would just be quiet. And they'd ask me like, "What's going on?" And I'd say, like, "Why does any of this matter? Like, if we're all gonna be dead in 100 years, and this isn't gonna exist at all, like, why do we do anything? Like, a lot of things we do, it just doesn't make sense." And I think this was a big turning point for me. I think at that time, I started listening to Alan Watts for the first time,
Yeah, I love Alan
and
Watts.
yeah, he's a really big one in my journey. Alan Watts, started listening to him. And that was about when I was 16, 15, I don't know. A couple years passes by. I'm about 18. I'm hanging out with my best friend. And he says, "Hey, man, my friend says he can get us some psilocybin, some psychedelic mushrooms." And he says, "You want to try it?" Like he had never tried it. I had never tried it. So I was like,
Hmm.
"Yeah, sure. We can do it together." And I remember we made it into tea. We're sitting in his room. We drank it. We went outside. We're sitting on the roof, waiting for it to kick in, all nervous and everything, not knowing what to expect. And he started feeling it before me. He was like acting crazy. He was standing up and he was like, "Whoa." He's like, "I'm flying," and just saying crazy stuff. And I was sitting there. I was like, "I'm not feeling anything, man." And an hour passed by. He was like going through a whole trip, man. I was just watching him. Then he ended up like he was laying in a bathtub. I had just given up. I was like, "Yeah, the mushrooms don't do anything for me." I went, sat in his room at his computer. And I remember I was like on YouTube looking at the recommended, and I saw a Mac Miller music video, Circles or Surf or something like that. And I remember that was one of my favorite songs, one of my favorite albums. And I always told myself, if I ever try like some psychedelic or something, I'm going to listen to this and watch this music video. And it
Hmm.
clicked, and I remembered, oh yeah, I got to watch this. So I turned it on. Keep in mind, at this point, I still didn't feel anything. And something in that song, something in the music video, I started feeling some emotions inside of me, some like pain, some trauma, and I just started crying. And the moment I started crying, it was like the whole veil just like melted away, and like it was like for the first time I was in some perspective that I had never had before, and it was triggered by the release of these emotions. And that was that my first mushroom trip. I definitely like I faced my deepest pain and my deepest trauma that I didn't even know I had, which was this pain of loneliness or feeling alone. And I had it since I was a little kid, and I just never even realized for all those years I was carrying like this weight on my shoulders. And like since it was always there, I didn't even know. I just got used to it. And when I finally released that weight and I was able to talk about it and open up about this, it was very profound. I never dealt with that trauma in the same way again after that experience. And I know this doesn't really have to do with the dimensions, higher dimensions. We haven't really quite got there yet because this was still the first. This was like the foundation. I do think before you pursue higher wisdom and awareness, it is good to build a foundation, and I think that happens naturally.
Mm-hmm.
And what that could look like is knowing about what is your, do you have trauma, or do you have deep energies, subconscious, unconscious energies that are acting within your system, becoming aware of them and working with them and integrating and becoming more stable. Because I had a lot of experience. So for about a year after that first mushroom trip, I did a lot of mushrooms. Like there would be times when I would meditate for a week straight, and I would take mushrooms every day for a week, like over and over again, just
Mm-hmm.
meditating the whole time, fasting, not sleeping, just doing stuff like that. And I wasn't fully stable, and maybe I'm still not. Maybe it's a ever evolving system, but definitely at the time I had a lot of unstable experience with the mushrooms, especially type of thing where it's like paranoia, fear, and this was necessary actually. Like that was the main thing that the mushroom experience really taught me was my inner workings and what does it mean to face my fear? What is fear? Like why do I feel anything that I feel? Because I feel like a lot of the time before I learned about this stuff, it was all just automatic. I would just feel
Mm-hmm.
something and I would never really like know why it's happening or what is happening. And I had no grasp on all of my own inner workings. And I would say my biggest, most profound moment after the first mushroom trip, we climbed a mountain at 3 in the morning, and we took a lot. The most I had ever taken, it was about 8 grams, and we took them at the
Woo.
bottom. Then we go to the top, and we were peaking on the mushrooms at the peak of the mountain at 4 in the morning, the dark blue sky. And I had this thing where I started remembering when I was 1 or 2 years old. I had a dream. I had a dream, very like vivid dream, and I had forgotten about it. But you know when you forget about something, but then something reminds you, and then you actually remember it, even though you did forget.
Mm-hmm.
It was like that. And what the dream was this black void and a
Hmm.
blue arrow and a green arrow, like an energetic little dot that's like swimming around in the void, and a blue and a green one. And they're just dancing and like playing with each other. And then it snapped to another image, and it was like this beautiful backdrop, dark blue, and there's a person in front of me, and we are staring into each other's eyes. And then I woke up and I forgot about it. It was like 2 years old in a crib, baby crib. And 18 years old, I'm on mushrooms and I'm looking at my friend. There's this beautiful backdrop, dark blue sky, looking at my best friend's face, looking in his eyes. We're staring at each other, and it synchronizes and clicks. And the moment perfectly syncs with the exact dream I had when I was 2 years old. And the reason
Wow.
that was so profound is because it uprooted my whole conception of time, of reality, because I was under the preconception that time is linear and that there's no possible way that I could dream something when I'm 2 and then have the exact moment when I'm 18. You see?
Mm-hmm.
So that really like started changing how do I view anything and everything. Everything is like this. It's like this process of there's a string and they just pull your string and you get pulled out a layer. and you see everything from like a whole perspective, and you're like, whoa, that's like one step beyond everything I ever knew before. And I think what people need to realize is that there is more layers, that your flower will unfold, that there is more to reality than what you may currently be experiencing or have experienced before. And I think the openness to that possibility, the openness to the unknown, really, because when you don't know about that higher dimension, it's a complete unknown, it's a complete faith, it's a complete trust. If you're afraid of anything that you can't understand, then you'll never give yourself the chance to see the beauty, the beautifulness, the amazingness that could be there because you're too afraid to just look, you know? That's how
Mhm.
everything is.
Yeah, there's that makes me think of this great Jim Morrison quote from The Doors where he says that it's something along the lines of once you conquer your fear, there's nothing left that you have. I think it's once you conquer your fear, there's nothing left you have to fear, or something like that. And it's very simple, but I don't think people like. I think what you're saying is uh, perfectly on point with that. Where it's like if we think about all the things that hold us back in life, or that hold back most people, it all can be, I think, distilled down to time and fear. But even time, I think, like what I was saying earlier when I joked about the thing that people say about killing time, I think time isn't something that is inherently fear causing, but it's something that we do fear,
Yeah.
both the future and the past, because we sort of in a way fear the past because sometimes it's nostalgia, sometimes it's regret, sometimes it's pain, and we fear the future a lot more vividly because we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, with the past, we've experienced it, but with the future, there's so many things that can happen. And yeah, so I think that what you're talking about there about really coming to terms with everything that you're fearful of, it's like that is I couldn't agree more that that is the first step, I think, to reaching beyond where we are now to somewhere else. Because if you can get past the fears, then you can sort of experiment, like you can start playing around, kind of like what you were talking about, where you can start living more intentionally because you you're no longer letting yourself get held back by forces external to yourself.
Yeah, and there's one thing too. It's like you start out with facing the things or the ideas that you are afraid of. And then the step above that actually is to face fear itself, like to look plainly at fear when you're experiencing it. Because a lot of times when you're afraid of something, that's when you're still in the perspective of like you're in the bubble of fear. You're not really
Hmm.
looking at the fear, you're in it. And it's being expressed via some thing like time or death or whatever the dark, whatever people get afraid of. It is you're in the fear. And then now what we're doing is we're taking a step back, we're grabbing the bubble that our head is stuck inside of, we're pushing that bubble out in front of us, and now we're looking at fear. You're feeling what am I feeling right now? What is this? And when you can look at it like that, and you're by labeling it and by looking at it, you're extricating yourself from it or from the illusion that you were stuck in it. And really fear is just a phenomena like anything else. It's the same as if you feel love in your heart. It's the same as if you feel hungry. It's these deep pulses of
Hmm.
some energetic movement within your field of awareness. And it's just another flavor. Fear is just another flavor, but it happens to be a particularly destructive at times flavor. And not that the flavor itself is destructive, but that when you're inside of it, it can become toxic if you let it shape your actions and your character. And I think that really a lot of times what true fear is, fear itself, is the impulse to make you look away from something. So if you're afraid of something, you don't want to look at it. You don't want to see the scary monster. You want to look the other way. You want to run away from it. You run away from the thing you're afraid of. Fear is this, it's like a magnet. It's like the negative side that's pushing you away. And when it comes to truth, if you're afraid of truth, if you're afraid of reality itself, if you're afraid of God, if you're afraid of the universe, this is not something you want to go away from, because what you end up learning is that it is you, that you are it, that you there is no separation between you and God or you and the universe. And that what happens is when you're afraid of something that you are so connected to, the only way to run, because you can't really run from it, is you run into yourself. And it's like the Ouroboros, the snake biting its own tail. And it's
Hmm.
it's this cycle that you can get stuck in, this infinite loop of running away, but there's nowhere to run. So you're just, where are you? You're nowhere. Like, you're stuck in a little circle. And
Yeah.
this
And
is
you're
this is
falling
not
deeper
what
and deeper.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And this is not something that I want to experience. And I'm not afraid of experiencing it. It's just a natural, yeah, that doesn't sound very appealing. I feel the light, I feel the sun. I'm gonna go towards the warmth. I'm not gonna get afraid of the warmth, even if it reveals itself to me in ways that I'm not necessarily used to. I'm not
Hmm.
gonna get afraid of that. I'm gonna trust it, because something in me, there's some inner knowledge, some intuition that says you don't got to be afraid of it. Like, it's just anything else. It's like warmth. It's dark. It's like the warmth or the dark. It's like the yin and the yang. It's not necessarily good and bad. It's just light and dark. So when you take away that the judging mind, the ego that says this is good, this is bad, when you take that away and you start looking at things for what is it really, like, on a deeper level, on an experiential level, what is it? And just looking at it, you can't even say that it's good or bad. I mean, you can feel the impulse to go towards it or away from it, but it's an objective. It's like you start to your life becomes less personal and more universal, is what happens when you unfold. And this is what people call ego death. Um the true ego death is actually when your body dies, because anytime you're still in a body, you need an ego. What is an ego? An ego is kind of just like a system that has evolved to act in certain ways. It's like a computer. Like, you wouldn't want to delete Windows 10. Like, say the ego is your operating system. You don't just want to delete it. Like, you know what I mean? Because unless you're
Yeah.
done with the computer, if you're fully done and you're not gonna ever use that computer again, and you're ready to just turn it off and go wake up to reality, yeah, sure, kill your OS. But I think that there is a time and place for all of us, and that every apple falls from the tree naturally, albeit some will be picked by the farmer, and that's okay too. There is no good and bad. And this is when it becomes difficult, when it comes to topics like suicide, when it comes to topics like death, to see it in the universal sense instead of the personal. That's what makes the ego so uncomfortable, because if I'm talking to the operating system and saying, yes, it's okay if we kill you because there's reality outside of the computer, the computer's not going to want to do that, obviously. But you are not the computer. You are not the Windows 10. You are every Windows. You are everything. Awareness is bound by nothing. So it does make people uncomfortable. And when I say people, I mean the ego. I mean the operating system, to approach in this universal way.
Hmm. Yeah. I love that line about what you were saying with some apples will fall naturally, but others will be picked. I think that that's a
Yep.
great way to, I think it's a great way to look at that. Um, one question that I have stemming from that, just to see how you think about it. I know a lot of times people, especially now, or not now, I think it's maybe an older idea that has kind of been pushed away because of the age of the world that we're in. But people used to consider things like fear and feelings like that, pain, anger, fear, all that, to be some sort of like external entity or something like that that exists and acts upon everybody. But I loved how you said it about how what those are doing are they're putting up sort of a smokescreen between you, well, between your soul and realizing that your soul is actually part of everything and that you are a
Mm.
totality, just as everything is a totality. And so how do you look at those things like fear and like anger and things that hold us back from seeing ourselves as what we are, which is part of the totality of the universe? Do you think that they are acting on their own, or do you think it's some sort of more of like an immune response from you know just the flesh of, the earthly realm kind of thing, preventing us from jumping over into the spiritual realm.
Yeah, so I'll start by saying the deepest truths from our human perspective will always be paradoxical. They won't make sense to the logical mind. And I'm prefacing that because I'm about to say it's both. That you could see the emotions and the impulses and the activity within you as external entities. But what I mean by that, the reality of that is that they are external from awareness. And awareness is what you are. Awareness is not connected to anything. It's separate from form. There's a negative and the positive on the magnet, right? The yin and the yang. So you are the awareness and you are also the form.
Hmm.
And this is where it's funny is because it is from the perspective of pure awareness. Yes, they are completely external entities. The anger, it just seems to just come up whenever it feels like anything you feel, any emotion, it just seems to just kind of pop up like a little hiccup, like a bubble. And it's like, oh, I didn't do that. Like, where'd that come from? But
Hmm.
then from the perspective of the totality of you are the form and the formless, and that really those are one, just split in half, mirrored, then it is you. You are the anger. You are, it depends what perspective you want to look at it from.
Mm. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, so it kind of all depends on your perspective there of how you want to define it.
And
Um,
that's the beauty, and that's the, I think the tool that knowing this is that say you're feeling the anger and something in you says like, man, I'm not trying to feel this way. Well, then you can remember, oh yeah, I'm just pure awareness and that this is just an experience that I'm experiencing. And by doing that and by stepping into the awareness, this is you're extricating yourself from that situation.
mhm. That, yeah, that leads me into something else that I wanted to ask you about, that's related to this topic. You had made a video about it. You made a distinction between two ways that people can live, and I think that the bifurcation there relates to what we're talking about here about the that smoke screen between what's physical and what's spiritual. And you had brought up about living either in survival mode or in creator mode, and that's something that whenever you realize um, that you're living just to survive. And if you realize that and take notice of it, then you can actually start living to create, and things start coming out of you. Like you actually can start producing rather than just taking. Could you elaborate on that idea a little bit?
Yeah, there's actually that was a very good pattern connection you just made right there. I never thought about is the form and the formless are a direct sync with survival and creatorship in the sense that the form, any when I say form, I mean anything you experience in a sensory level
Hmm.
and not the experiencer itself, not the pure awareness, not the uh transparent circular field itself. No, I'm talking about anything that appears within the field of awareness is what you could call the realm of change. It's the fleeting realm. The forms are always growing and dying and changing forms and evolving. And
Hmm.
so if you are so associated with only the form, then that is survivorship. What is wanting survival is for you to stay. Now, if you're identified as form, if you're identified as just your physical body in a physical world, well, you're going to have a tough time surviving. You see, because the only thing that is like survival proof is awareness itself. The awareness is, it cannot be born or die. It is just not even in a dimension of birth or death. Like it's completely outside of that. It's in a whole different category.
Hmm.
So you could say that what is the creator of reality? You could say it's awareness because we know for sure that at least awareness was always there. We don't know what form God is. We don't know what form the awareness took to create whatever we're experiencing, but we do know that the field of awareness itself was present, or at least I know that. I can't speak for everybody, but So that is survival and creatorship, form and formless. And the important thing to realize is not that one's not good or bad, like I said earlier, and actually life strives for balance, and that you should be one foot in each door. You have one foot in the survival world and one foot in the godlike, eternal, pure awareness world.
Hmm.
And by doing that, this is where you can have the broadest perspective. Because if you're only in one, think of a yin and yang. What if the yin and yang was just white?
Yeah, it'd be
Like,
nothing.
yeah,
Yeah.
and if it was just black,
Yeah,
there
it would be nothing. Yeah, that was a great
exactly.
relating to Alan Watts because that's someone who you said, has really built kind of who you are. I remember him giving a talk on that where he was talking about that separation of the yin and yang where um, everyone always everyone understands that the black and the white are codependent on each other, but like you're saying, nobody really talks about the fact, and this is what he was pointing out and what you just pointed out here is that without the other, there can't be one or the other. Like you can't have one without the other. And I think that that's something that a lot of people misunderstand whenever we talk about like the God question or things like that. Is it's like, well, how could these things happen if there be a God, or how could these things happen if there's not a God? And at the end of the day, it all breaks down to if there wasn't these things happening, there wouldn't be any form. Like this all exists because there's a duality going on.
Yeah, I
Because
would say you said that. Sorry for the interruption, but you
no, you're
said
good.
that you couldn't have one without the other. I actually don't agree on that line. I believe you could have all white or you could have all black. It's just different. Like
Hmm.
if you have a black circle and then a yin and yang next to it, the yin and yang will have infinitely more like complexity. So all it is just it's like evolution. You're going from one thing and then now you have two things, or maybe you have two things and now it's three. And so it's not necessarily that you need the yin and yang for primordia to exist, for energy itself to exist on its own,
Hmm.
but putting them together does put us into this whole new reality. And this is something to be appreciated.
My thought process there is at least how I've always thought about it from thinking about kind of different creation accounts, and especially in Genesis, and this plays into what you're saying, is that before creation, there wouldn't have been light and darkness. It was they were kind of coexistent. And then our definition of it, or not our definition, but it being given definition is what kind of created that split. And then now we live in that split where there is a difference and there is this image of the yin and yang.
Yeah, and then what you said was that some people believe that before the yin and yang, it was only light, or in the Bible, like you said,
Yeah.
before God spoke anything to existence, it was all just either light or dark or something like that. And what
Hmm.
I'm proposing is that what the yin and the yang is the fundamental split of that primordial energy, of that awareness, and that the actuality of it is that what is before the yin and yang is actually the yin and the yang put together into one unified state, and that
Hmm.
that separation of those core elements that we call positive and negative, that we call light and dark, that we call good and bad, that split um essentially is just reality itself split into two mirrored opposites, and I guess equals since they're mirrored.
Yeah, and I guess from that point of view that we're talking about, that would relate to the idea of kind of unlocking that creator mode while living in survival. Because if we live our lives with that in mind of what we're talking about, with that light and darkness are from the beginning coexistent and then they have a split whenever it comes to physical reality, you would go to think that it continues to exist in that way, and that split is kind of what I was talking about earlier with the smoke screen, and that if you can kind of walk past that smoke screen, or if you can pierce the veil like some people say, that's whenever you can live in the knowledge that all things are equal.
And that's the universal perspective as opposed to the personal, as opposed to the egoic.
Mm-hmm.
structure, because with the ego, with the operating system, everything is about me. It's, and when I say me, it's not even the thing that that you truly are is not the thing that's saying me. Of course, what you truly are is the thing actually beyond that. There's something there, some awareness, is this is your true nature. And the ego likes to say, no, me, the physical body, me, this character, like, and it sees everything from this perspective of, like, I'm very important, and that everything I experience matters and should matter to everyone. Like, it's very important whether I live or I die. And this is how the ego sees things. And it's not necessarily negative, it's just how it is. And what I'm
Mm-hmm.
proposing is that what you truly are as pure awareness, if you can recognize that nature and to be that nature, and to, when I say be that nature, is because the awareness actually, it cannot look at itself. It's like your eye cannot look at its own eye. You've never actually seen your own face except for in a mirror or on a phone in some
Yeah.
reflection. And that this is the nature of the awareness, as above, so below. It's like the awareness can only, you can only be the awareness. This is something that I've recently been trying to do, is I would try to look at my awareness. I'm like, I know I'm here. I know the awareness is here. Like I can feel my being. Where am I? And I'd look and look, and I try to close my eyes. I try to look at my third eye or look backwards or anything. And I just couldn't do it. And essentially I realized that is not the nature of awareness, to be aware of itself, because if it was aware of itself, it would be separate from itself. And awareness is not separate from anything. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not even possible.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love that way of looking at it because that kind of proves in a sort of way that there isn't any other way for this universe to exist than everything being one and the same, only separated by sight. Because, like you said, and this is a common thing that I've read in a lot of religions, is that people historically have seen something like the mirror or the reflection as this kind of like inherent evil into the world. And I think that that relates to this because if you can't see your reflection, you really have no way to distinguish yourself from everything else because you just are existing in everything. And so you're like one little node on the giant face of creation, as opposed to whenever, you actually can see your reflection, like what you're saying, because we've never actually seen our face, but we think we've seen our face because we've seen ourselves in water, we've seen ourselves in the mirror, we've seen ourselves in the phone, in our phones, that we start to think of ourselves as us. And that's I think what you're getting at. Whereas
An image, you have an image
yeah,
in your head.
yeah, yeah, an image. Because without that, I can't speak to it because I've never existed in a time where I haven't been able to see that image of myself. But I would imagine that before that, there would be this sort of holistic way of looking at yourself. Like I was saying about the node, where it's like you can't, yeah, like there is no separation between me and everything else. I'm just like, I mean, I interact with everything, so there should be no reason why I'm separate from it. I mean, and
Yeah.
that's even broken down to simple things like us driving a car. Like when we're driving a car, what is different about us and the car? What we're doing. The car is sort of like an extension. It's like a prosthetic arm that we're using. So in the moment of us driving it, it's like we are no different from that. And I think that that kind of applies broadly to everything that we do, where it's like the way that the universe exists is that we're a part of it actively, and we aren't our own thing. And then that realization is what leads to what you're talking about that switching into different modes of perception.
And then here's the paradox, is that you are the ego and you are the character, and that you can see your own face in the mirror. And that this is why it's what, when I started the podcast, I said I talk about things that it's really hard to talk about. Most people probably don't even try. Is these paradoxical truths within our language structure. Just what are you going to say? You are the ego. You do have your separateness. But when I sit here and I look at a tree 50 feet away off in the distance, seemingly so separate from me, and I stare at that tree for a while, and I let 10, 15 minutes pass, and I just keep staring at that tree. I really don't feel like I'm very separate from the tree, if that makes sense. Like It's
Hmm.
almost as if my awareness is looking at the tree and I can almost feel the tree looking back at me. And then I'm like, okay, where's all this taking place? And I realize the place that it's all taking place is all one place. Like the place where there is seemingly me and then there's seemingly the tree that's 50 feet away from me. This is happening in the same place and the same awareness, you see? And when you really give it time and when you really be open to that possibility, you start to you feel it. This is where it gets experiential. This is, you're not just talking about it, it's not just an idea. No, you're experiencing complete oneness, complete lack of separation with something that you previously believed was so separate from you. And what does that look like? What does it look like or feel like for something to be so called one with you?
Hmm.
um I think like for something to be one, it needs to be connected to the same thing. It's all connected, not separated. So if you can see the awareness, if you can see your own existence from a metaphysical point of view, not just from a humanistic point of view, um, this is where you see there is no separation. Like if you can show me one separation in my existence, I'll give you $1 million. Like I would be very, very impressed if you could prove to me that I'm separate from anything. Like I'd be very
Yeah.
impressed.
Yeah. And I mean, it is true. And I think what you're saying about like most people don't think about the things that you're thinking about, I think that that's why. It's because these things, it's kind of like that line from like the Constitution or whatever, where it's like these are self-evident truths. And it's like sometimes, a lot of the time actually, self-evident truths that are so blatantly self-evident, I think are the hardest ones to reckon with for people. And I think it's because of that ego, because it's something that you look at and there's really no way that you can argue it beyond like just some little statements of like, I don't agree, I don't agree with that. That's not how I perceive reality. But it's like you can't make that argument broadly. Someone can't come in and make that argument because, yeah, I mean, even like what I was saying about the car, like that's a simple example, but it applies it to everything, and that is in the as above, so below mentality. It's like everything that we do is either caused or affected by something else. And yeah, I mean, I would have to give somebody $1 million too, because there is nothing that we do independent of anything else. Everything is dependent on itself. Everything is, a handshake between one part of creation and another part of creation in a way.
There's one thing that about my communication is when you're communicating with someone, you probably each have your own frame of reference. Now, for many people in our society, they want a scientific frame of reference. But the
Hmm.
way I operate is not scientific. It's resonant, it's energy, it's frequency. So if I'm speaking, I don't even feel the need to scientifically logically explain my words because I know through resonance that if someone is hearing me and they're like they are open to my frequency and maybe even on a similar frequency, that they don't need this scientific explanation because they can feel the deeper truth that is in the frequency. As abstract as that sounds, people who hear this, there will be some who understand.
Hmm. Yeah. And I mean, that is something that I think the Enlightenment era of civilization, like post-Renaissance, really took away from us, is that now everything has to be a proof, everything has to be like a cycle of arguments that lead to a conclusion. Everything has to be like, oh, well, if you're saying this, you need to be able to replicate it. And I think that idea has been why so many people have trouble, like what you're saying, have so much trouble being able to resonate with like art, whatever it is, music, movies, and it kind of books, people speaking, all these sorts of things. And it's because we want um, we now kind of want and demand of reality an answer to everything. But those things don't work in and of themselves if you always have to explain it. Like I think music criticism is one of the goofiest things to get into, like from people who try to do it analytically. Because how are you gonna criticize with the scientific method a song that has the power to affect 30,000 people simultaneously in a theater or in a stadium. Like there's no way to quantify that with science. And I think that most of the things that we experience in our day-to-day lives are completely separate from science. I think science is just one way of looking at certain parts of the universe. Like it's a way to understand physics and it's a way to understand why things happen the way they happen, but it doesn't relate to the same dimension that we experience soul and that we experience heart and things like that through.
Well, you see, the problem with needing proof, the problem with the scientific, is that they're operating within a certain dimension. Or
Mm-hmm.
it's like the result of your science will only ever be, it'll always be limited to the dimension in which you're doing the science. So if you're in a 3D mind awareness and you're doing science from that perspective, every answer, so-called answer, every truth you get out of it will always be limited to the 3D as long as you, the experiencer, are in that awareness. This is a problem with science, is that a true truth is something you experience. You see,
Mm-hmm.
anytime you talk about truth, well, now it's just truth being talked about. It's not the truth anymore. It's just truth being talked about. You see, now you're a step
Mm-hmm.
away from it. So
Yeah.
yeah, really, and I would say I am scientific in a sense. You see, I will take certain scientific ideas like experimentation or hypothesis, and I will apply this to a abstract and spiritual experience. For example, we're talking about noticing the lack of separation between self and other, or the lack of separation within the overall field of awareness that you always have been. um an experiment you could do is imagine everything that happens in your life that isn't caused by you. So anything you experience that seemingly you didn't choose for it to happen, imagine that's God. Imagine that God is talking. Like imagine a school bus drives by and God made that school bus drive by. And then you wonder, well, why would he do that? And then some little kid comes up to you and he says, hey, you want to play a game with me? And you're like, yeah, sure. And the little kid says, you are the chosen one. and like and normally if a little kid says that, you're not gonna, you're like, okay, whatever, I'm the chosen one playing a game. But now if you're looking at it and saying, well, everything I experience is God, well, why would God say that to me? So then you ask the little kid and you say, well, am I the chosen one or is he the chosen one? And then the little kid starts laughing and he says, you're funny, there is no chosen one. That's a real experience that I had a couple of days ago. And it was very profound for me to experience that with my preconception that everything I'm experiencing is God. And it was an experiment. It's purely scientific. I just said, I wonder what would happen if I view reality in this way. I didn't really have a hypothesis. I kind of just went into it open ended. And I noticed that if I view everything as God, everything seems to have meaning. It's like everything, every little thing is just full of meaning and it's just waiting to be discovered. It's still in the veil of the unknown and in the realm of the mysterious. And the mysterious is something that I'm starting to fall in love with because I realize what is mystery. Mystery is infinite potential. You see, me and
Mm-hmm.
my friend, we climbed a mountain a couple weeks ago, and we're sitting on top of this mountain on these big rocks. And he hits one of the rocks with his knuckles, and it makes like a metal hollow noise. It's like, you know what I'm talking about? It's like ding, and there's like a little echo or something. Like you could feel
Mm-hmm.
it's like hollow, and we're like, man, this looks like a normal rock. Like it feels like a normal rock. And he's like, "Are we in the Matrix? Like, what is happening? Like, why does this rock is like hollow and sounds like metal?" And in that little space, I even said to him, I said, "Hey, look, right now we're in the place of mystery. Like, we have no idea, like, what is." And when you're in the space of mystery, your mind starts to just hop around, and you're trying to find every little connection you can make to understand whatever it is that's a mystery. So it's this infinite potential because while you're in that space, the reasoning could be anything, the result could be anything, the who done it could be anyone. You see, this is the beauty of the mystery. And I think where this becomes important when it comes to existentialism and when it comes to deeper truths is that the sooner you can fall in love with the mystery instead of be afraid of it, that is like this is you need to take that step. It is a one. It's like the baby steps. The baby needs to take the first step before he can take the fourth, right?
Hmm.
If you don't take the first step, you're never going to take the fourth, right? You need to take the step where when you don't understand something, when something isn't quite clear to you, instead of allowing the impulse of fear to consume you, to look at the fear, extricate yourself from it, label it, feel it, notice it's there, and then go back to the mystery and look at it with the new set of eyes that's not still stuck in the fear bubble. And now that you're looking at it for what it really is, for what the uncertainty, the mystery, for what it really is, just in the same way that you looked at fear for what it really is, this is a very beautiful place to be. It's because infinite potential, imagine that. It's like a dream, right?
Hmm.
Imagine I have a song, and there's a lyric in it, and it says, "The void's not empty, it's a canvas unseen." You see, it's a whole
Hmm.
different switch. It's still the same void, it's still the same uncertainty, it's still the same mystery, but with the attitude of curiosity as opposed to survival. This is where you're taking your second or your third step, right? Now, here's the secret, okay? I have a feeling there's infinite steps. So so the sooner you can get confident and start walking, and then maybe you could learn how to run, maybe you could find a bike and learn how to ride a bike, maybe you could learn how to swim, maybe you could get a freaking airplane license and fly an airplane. And I'm talking metaphysical here, because remember, the first step was stop being afraid and start having curiosity, right? So what does riding a bike mean?
Yeah.
Like, what does it mean to fly? This is now, see, now we're curious. We're curious of, like, what could that be? What could it be? Like, it could be anything, you know? So this is healthy. This is where I think that I say we want to be, because in my experience, like I said, there's a singularity. So I'm not experiencing anyone right now that's, telling me, hey, no, I don't want to do that. And they're saying, I love to be afraid, and being afraid feels so amazing, and I'd do that forever. You see,
Hmm.
I don't experience anybody saying that to me. So I'm just going to assume we're all wanting to grow and to start taking our steps and to know, where are we in this universe? Like, why do I exist? And like, what beauty is there to be found right around the corner? When one door is closed, many more are open. You see?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just waiting for us to take that step. And
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that in my mind, that connects to two things that I've heard you say in your videos that I wanted to talk to you about, but it actually like perfectly combines those two, funnily enough. Um, One of them is you talk about life being like a river where the path that a river takes isn't accidental. It's meant to be how it's going to be, in the future. That's how it's always meant to be. That's why it travels the way it travels. And then there's also another idea that you talked about, and it's sort of relating to what we've been talking about through this whole episode about, when you realize that you're living in this space where we all are the same thing, the idea of giving out energy to people and getting it back. And you call that the thermodynamics of the soul, which I love that quote. And I think that those two things perfectly dance with each other, because what you're talking about is whenever you're able to step past the fear, everything in the world just starts opening up to you. It's like lotus flowers everywhere, all these possibilities for you to all these different rabbit holes for you to go down. I mean, even that rock that you're talking about with your friend, it's like um whether or not that rock is anything, it could just be a rock, but it's like just that happening led us to talking about it right now and led me to thinking about what I'm thinking about and led you to think about things in a different way. And it's all because your friend knocked on a rock and it made a noise. And it
That's
seems like such a
insane, man. And like you
yeah.
point that out, I had no awareness of that rabbit hole. And now I'm thinking, how many rabbit holes am I not aware of that are happening? Like, how many times did I knock on a rock? How many times did I trip on a stick? And did that change my entire, like, so many things? Like, that's crazy. And then it's probably coming from every angle at the same time. It's like, this is the beauty of higher dimensions, of reality and its inner workings and its intelligence is the perfection. You know, there's this quote from Ram Dass, and he said he was in India talking to an old Indian saint who was like about to die or something. And he said, like, uh, he said, how can life be perfect if there's all this suffering and if people are over here going through this and this and rape and murder and everything? And then the saint, he said, he just smiled and he said, can't you see how it's all perfect? And he, the reason he doesn't explain further is because you don't need to. You see, because as long as someone's holding down the fort and remembering and being in the awareness of the perfection, all they need to do is just be that and say, yeah, everything's perfect. Because there is a place where everything is perfect. There is a way
Yeah.
to look at reality where everything is perfect. And I truly believe that the higher and higher you go, the more and more perfect it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that what you said about if, as long as there's someone holding down the fort, remembering, it's like as long as there's somebody remembering like these things that have happened in the past, whatever it may be, like with Ram Dass, what he was saying about, all the suffering that goes on, all these tragedies that happen in the present, which now is the past, looking back at it in the present, that was the worst thing imaginable for the people involved. And I mean, I know that from my own life, just with experiencing absolutely horrible things that I wouldn't want to re-experience. But in a way, and it's hard to even call that beautiful, but in a way, it's like, what have those, what has that suffering led me, and what has that suffering led other people to do? How has that galvanized us into the person we are now, moving into the person we'll become? And I think that idea of the river always flowing and knowing its direction, even if the things in the river don't know the direction it's going. As long as the river knows the direction, and if we're all the river, we in some way know the direction.
Yes, and this is actually the nature of faith and trust. And this is something I talk about a lot because in my own journey, trust has actually turned out to be the most important thing imaginable. And it's weird because I never really gave the idea or the concept of trust much thought. I never really just thought about it. It never had any significance. And then it turns out to be the most important thing so far. And this is what it really means to have faith is the acknowledgement of a higher intelligence. Like you said, the water doesn't know which way it's flowing, but the river does. And as long as the river knows the water is going to go where it's going to go, this is the acknowledgement of a higher system, of a higher intelligence, of there is something at play here. When I say my reality is God and that everything I experience is God speaking to me in some way, um, this is very advanced, very abstract, very intelligent. Like the nature of God is that it is beyond you, that it is that you don't know how it works. Or think about it this way. Imagine a 1 year old child, and then the 1 year old child has a 50-year old parent. Okay. The 1 year old child might not even know that the parent exists. Like it experiences the parent, but it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't think about it. It doesn't even necessarily believe in it. It's just experiencing being a baby. The entire time it's having that experience, this 50-year-old is having such an advanced intelligence and so many intricacies happening that the baby just completely is unaware of, albeit the baby is at the whim of the 50-year-old. The baby, it needs to be fed, it needs to have shelter, it needs love, and it doesn't even know, like it can't even begin to even grasp the intricacies of what is the reality of its parent. And this is much the same as everything else, as a seed coming off of a tree, as a human, Ryan Robinson, sitting here on a podcast saying, everything I experience is God. And when I say God, I'm pointing at that mystery. I'm the baby pointing at the 50-year-old. I don't know what it is. I don't know the intricacies of it. I have not even a granular of like a tiny atom of knowledge. I'm in a whole different perspective of God. And so is the baby and the 50-year-old. So is me and God. So this is true faith. The baby needs to have faith and needs to trust its parent, especially as it gets older. Think about it this way. If you have a 4 or 5-year-old child, Imagine your child, your 5-year-old child, it knows how to walk, it can move, it can do things. Now imagine that child doesn't trust you as the parent. Every time it sees you, it runs away from you and goes the opposite way. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It has the capacity to do that. It needs to trust you. If it doesn't trust you, you cannot give it life. You cannot give it love. You cannot give it food. You cannot give it shelter. You cannot teach it and raise it and guide it as it becomes what it's meant to be. This is much the same as a human with God, with Source, with the higher intelligence that is ever present in all of our experience. We have the capacity to run away from it. And this is what I said earlier. When you have fear and you try to run from God, you run into yourself, because the only place to go that's not God is into yourself. But that's a self recursion. It's a loop. It's a curse. You don't want to do that. You don't want to run away from God. You see, that's just not something you want to do. That the baby doesn't want to run away from the parent. So trust. This is why trust is the most singular, most important thing in existence, literally. And actually, I can go metaphysical with this. Just I'm all I'm gonna say is take anything I say right now with a grain of salt. But there's a deeper reason why trust, because even God needs to trust God. If God didn't trust that God existed, God wouldn't exist. Or it would, but it just it would like destabilize or something. Like it needs to hold, like we said, holding down the fort. There has to be somebody that is in the true awareness, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's actually there's something wrong with what I just said, and I realize it's because there's always a God above God. There's always the only thing that doesn't need to trust is beyond survival. So primordia, before the yin and the yang, that doesn't need to trust itself. Awareness in that state doesn't need to trust anything because it is everything. Like, well, what are you going to trust? You are everything, right? But every step below that, so pretty much all of creation, it needs to have some level of trust. Otherwise, it is not stable. And when I mean stable, I mean able to keep evolving, right? You need to have some trust in something, whether it's a God, whether it's your higher self, whether it's the universe, whether it is anything. As long as you are not in the primordial state, which is a paradox again, you are in the primordial state right now and you always are. You're just experiencing not the unified whole entirety of that primordial state. So
Mm-hmm.
until you get to that point, and trust me, when you get there, you will know. You won't need me to tell you. You probably even remember me saying this right now, along with like infinite other memories simultaneously. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, for a human, you need to have trust. If you don't have trust, you're going to be living in survival. You're going to not be evolving or touching higher dimensions of awareness. You're going to be stuck in a little loop. So trust is the most important thing you can have.
Yeah. 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 That what that makes me think of is with the idea of God presiding over all of this and us just needing to trust his process because we as part of that process and also the whole process, we are that child. We don't know what it is. We don't know the reason why we're here, but if we can believe that there is somebody in the driver's seat who isn't us, then we can just say, okay, I don't need to fear as much anymore because everything that is coming against me that might have seemed adversarial in the past to my perception is actually meant to be ways for me to grow. And I think that there's this story from Exodus where Moses is interacting with God, and I think it perfectly describes what you're saying about our relationship to that divine goodness. Is God tells Moses, "Hey, you're going to be able to see me for a split second, but you're only going to be able to see me once I pass you." And I think that perfectly encapsulates what that relationship is with us with God is that you can only see him once he's already moved. And even if you are presently, in the Ram Dass sort of be here now, if you're in this moment, you don't always see the reason why these moments are happening until maybe a month, 6 months, a year, a decade after something has happened. And then you're like, oh, That's why that happened. It made no sense to me when it happened, but that was God working there. And I think that story from Exodus perfectly describes that, because Moses can only see God when he's already past him. He can only see him when he's already, like, we can't look at God in the present and fully understand him, because, and I mean that's what happens throughout all kinds of religions, is if you see the true face of the divine, you're you're blinded. Like you just can't get it, because we are that baby and they're the parent who's so many years ahead of us, who's so much more experienced than us.
Well, here's one thing is on the form and the one half of the yin and yang, what you're saying is true. And then on the other half of the yin and yang, you are the eternal self. And I think the reason you can't look at God, remember earlier I said awareness can't look at awareness. You can't look at the awareness itself, can't look at itself.
Hmm.
So, of course, whatever God is appearing, because everything we experience is within awareness, right? So, if God is revealing himself to us within our awareness, well, if he were to really reveal himself, he would look just like us and it would be invisible, you see?
Hmm.
Of course, the forms, they do have higher intelligence. So, we are the baby in the dimension, and we don't understand the intricacies and that there are higher things and that God does have much higher forms, that if our human self were to see some higher dimension of God, we would be blinded. Of course, our CPU would get fried and just overload. It's like trying to run Minecraft on a calculator at school. Like, I'm sure you could. I think I saw a video of that actually recently, but anyway, same,
Yeah, it's
same
like a
concept.
yeah, it's going to be severely reduced, if not completely blowing out the operating system of it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So, but then I think it's important because we need balance is to look at both of them. And I love that we're doing this thing. You did it earlier where I said one half of the story and didn't realize I was missing the other side. And then right after you said, like, it was when we talked about people going through like suffering and how real that feels. And then the yogi was like, everything is perfect. And like, all I said was everything is perfect, and you perfectly completed the yin yang by saying, yeah, but like that suffering is so real, and when you're experiencing it, like it's the worst thing ever, right? So I like that. Now we're doing this thing. I'm balancing it out. Yes, we are the baby to God, but actually the awareness that makes up our reality, our existence, it is of God. It is a child of God. It is not God. I don't claim to be God. I'm just saying I feel like it's like a seed coming off of a tree, right? The seed is basically one with the tree. It's going to look identical almost to the first tree. It has the same structure, same way of being overall. It's the baby tree to the father tree. Uh, they're both trees. You see, that's what I mean when I say when Jesus says I and the Father are one. I think that's what he means is the overall totality, the before the yin and the yang, the primordia that makes up what I call God. I'm assuming is the primordia that is what makes up anything else, aka my own experience, because my own experience is everything for me. Like there would be no God if I didn't have this field of awareness, if I didn't experience these forms to give me ideas and the ability to think with language, to say, oh, there is God or something created me. What would be before that? And then what would be before that? And then before that, that's where it all becomes one. So I think it's key. The reason I say this is because if you separate yourself too much from God, like you don't want to go too unified, because I don't know, maybe try. I haven't tried that, but I have been too separate from the idea of God. I feel like I'm at a good balance now where I can feel within my experience, here is God right in front of me, everything I experience, every sensation, every thought, every idea, everything that I can, that's tangible, and tangible on a metaphysical sense, not just physical, but even my own dreams or my own uh, da- fascinations, imaginations, right? This is all God. And then I feel myself. And it's the tricky thing about myself is that it's like it's a transparent overlay that is on everything. Like it's a big circular, it's like a orb or a circle and it's like this clear, transparent spaciousness, but it's encapsulating all of the form. It's like woven together perfectly. Like think about dark energy between each atom, or like
Mhm.
the void between each atom. That you could say that is the formless self, the awareness, and then every atom I call that God because I don't control the atoms, and
Mhm.
I don't control the awareness because the awareness doesn't do anything. I just am the awareness. You see, there really is no controlling. Controlling's like I think it's an idea or an illusion that only works within lower dimensions because honestly, like I remember earlier I said anything that I'm not doing is God, but then I realized even the things I think I'm doing, I started looking at it and I'm like, wait, am I actually doing it? Because it kind of just feels like it's happening. You see?
Mhm.
So then
And and
the
and for
awareness is like the
someone,
one thing that it never moves, it never changes. So that's what I identify as and say that's me.
yeah, yeah, and I mean for someone else who's experiencing, like for me, experiencing life how I'm experiencing it, everything that you're doing would be kind of in that realm of what you're talking about, where it's these are things that are happening by God's design. But then to you, it's like these are the things that are happening within my design. And so it's like in that way, that's all of us being inside
Yeah,
God. And
exactly.
so
It is.
so then it's both free will and also, a will that is being kind of led.
Yes.
And I think that
And
that's
I've
why
always
the
said that. I've always said that. People always ask, is it free will or is it God's will? And I always just had this feeling, this intuitive feeling that says it's both. Like I do
yeah.
have free will, but somehow, even though I'm doing things, somehow it's like part of a bigger picture and it's like the right puzzle piece. It just fits right into place. I don't know how that is. I'm going to call that God's will.
Yeah. And I mean, to the point of the river, um, I am just a molecule of water, you're just a molecule of water, but together we're part of this entire river. And if we're assuming that God is the river and that both of us and everybody else are molecules in that river, then it is free will because we're an individual molecule, but it's also predestined happening because if God's in the driver's seat, then we can assume that he knows the road to take.
You know, it's so funny that sometimes like as we're having this conversation, it'll feel like I'm saying something so profound, but then as I'm like feeling what I'm saying, it's just so simple and it's just so
Hmm.
obvious that I kind of laugh at myself. I'm like, bro, like I feel like a caveman just saying some like obvious thing that everybody already knows. Because I'm imagining it from like higher perspective, like people hearing this podcast that are like already there, and it's kind of like we're just preaching to the choir. And I realized if we're the atoms going through the river and we're also free will, like we kind of are the choir, like we're God's choir, and we're just like all flowing down the river. And this podcast is just like two, me and you, we're sitting on like a little raft, and we have like microphones set up. And we're just like there's speakers on it, so all the other atoms who are like flowing around us, they can hear us, and we're just standing there, just yeah, man. I think we're like on a raft right now, and we're just like going through the river, and like something's making it happen. Like,
Yeah, that's exactly how this feels. And I mean,
it's like
back to your original question to me. I mean, that's why I love podcasts because they can be like that little PA system in the river of existence where just two people can be having a conversation that otherwise would just be between the two of them. But even in the way that we're talking about with knocking on that random rock that ended up just being this very cool thing that led to our conversation about it, that led to all these new ideas. I mean, a conversation that we would have just by ourselves over a Zoom call could have all of these ramifications out into the world that nobody would even know because they weren't part of it. But then in the scope of a podcast, because they get to be the fly on the wall, it like allows for that instant synchronicity, that instant realization of, oh, this is why I'm thinking the way I'm thinking. This is why this makes sense. This is why this thing that they're saying is a truth that I've always known but never really thought. And I think that that's the beautiful thing about sharing these kinds of conversations out with the world is it just kind of I think it cuts down on the time that it takes for the resonance of this conversation to reach everybody else.
yeah, man. It's like we're sitting on the raft, and then we're like, hey, bro, I have an idea. And first, before we have our speakers, first we just like bounce up and down on the raft, and it kind of creates like these ripple waves, and then it has like this weird effect where like the people get gravitated towards us from the waves bouncing, and then after that we invent some speakers, and then those are like automatic wave makers, and then we got microphones and we got internet, we got 5G satellites in the sky. Like, man, this shit's hooked up.
Yeah, and then the river's moving even faster at that point, and it just keeps going. But I think that that's a good place for us to start wrapping up. I mean, I would love to keep talking. I have like 10 more questions that I could ask probably within the next couple hours. But before we do wrap up, I wanna get one last thought from you. And we've already kind of covered it a lot just from the angles that this conversation has gone, like the realms that this conversation has gone into. So I might rephrase it a little bit than what I typically ask people, because usually I kind of use this as a time for the guest to retrospect on their past, but we already kind of talked about that, about why the things that you've done throughout your life have led you to where you are now. So I think what I want to do is, in the spirit of talking about us all as one totality, as one river, how do you see what you're doing right now with your YouTube channel and with your social network that you're working on, and with all these different things that you're doing? How do you see that as affecting the river that we're all in the future?
All I'm gonna say is it's gonna be way more beautiful than anything I can imagine right now. Like,
That's beautiful. Yeah, I know exactly what
I'm
you
seeing
mean.
phantoms. I'm seeing phantoms in the distance, and
Yeah.
I can see the beautiful intelligence of them, but I can't really make out the details. And all I know is like they're coming towards me. They look beautiful, and I'm more than happy to experience deeper and deeper levels of truth of what life is all about. Because even as a kid, I knew this is not all that there is, and I don't think my human body is necessarily limiting me. Of course, it is in a sense, but because the awareness is not bound by anything, it's almost as if like my body kind of feels like training wheels, or like some little, think about this, you get pure awareness and you put it into like an AI model, and then you put that AI model into a certain environment, and like it goes through a whole life and lives and dies and like has kids or whatever it does over all this time. That pure awareness, the same awareness, was inside of it the whole time. That's how I feel being in a human body. And yes, I am so excited to go beyond in whatever that looks like. And because I have no fear, that does mean that I do think when I die and that when I leave this body, I do think that's really going to be like the big gateway, or like a big checkpoint when it comes to my experience of reality. But at the same time, like I'm respecting the process, respecting that, hey, that intelligence put me into this AI and put me into this environment, and I'm gonna trust that it put me here for a reason, even when my life feels like difficult. And there's always this little part of me that even when I'm suffering, it can kind of feel like, wait, like, why is this happening? Like there has to be like a reason this is happening. And I kind of just rely on that, rely on my instinct, and go through my life in a way that feels most beneficial to everybody and everything. To what is kindness? Kindness is to give life rather than to take it. What is evil is to take life rather than to give it, right? So I try my best not to take anything away from anybody, and I try to give as much as I can to everybody, simply because it just feels natural. It's just like what life is doing through me in this vessel, right? I don't I try not to have too many um like pointless fantasies. And what I mean by that is I try not to get too far down the rabbit hole of my ego and thinking life needs to be a certain way or this way or that way. And I try my best to remain open as an empty vessel, an empty cup, so that whatever God feeds me, whatever life feeds me through my senses, that I can see the true meaning of it, and to evolve and to see higher and higher realities of my experience, as opposed to being in kind of a tunnel vision, which is with the ego and the survival. And of course, I do fall into it. You see, that life is about balance. I have one foot in each door, but I would say, um, I try not to do it too much. Okay, you don't want too much of anything, and this is what I recommend for everybody. But yeah, for the future, all I say is have no expectations and just expect kindness and expect love, especially if you yourself are kindness and if you are loving and if you're consistently putting out this type of energy. It really doesn't make sense that anything else would be there, you see, because uh, the universe is kind of a big echo chamber, and what we do as awareness with form is we cast out these echoes, and sometimes the echoes, they come back in a day, sometimes they come back in a life, sometimes they come back in many lives, and sometimes they come back in like millions of lives. And there could be big echoes, big waves in the universe of ocean energy, and there could be tiny ripples, right? So this is like how reality works. It's all just light. It's like light playing with the self, dancing with the self through mirrors. It's very objective. It's very universal. It's not so animalistic, so like personal and like how humans often think it is. It's really more kind of actually scientific. It's kind of like objective, universal. And this is what's happening. So if you're casting out hatred and if you're casting out fear, you're casting out these echoes, they're going to come back to you. That's okay, because awareness cannot be harmed by any echo. Even if you're living in fear, even if you're living in suffering, seeming suffering, your awareness itself is always beyond it. And all it has to do is remember that. And it's boom, you're just right out of it. You just remembered. So I would say, like, find what resonates with you. For me, it is love, kindness, like, I don't know, positive energy. Like, I just naturally feel that feels good for me. So what I do is I cast out all these echoes and these waves of this energy. And I really see no reason why it would be anything else, because I'm not living in fear. I'm not living in hatred. So that's my advice, and have no expectations.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Ryan, for coming on today. I I really I really I really enjoyed this conversation. This was great. This is probably one of, I mean, I will say this to everybody, but I think this is definitely one of my favorite episodes that I've done here, just because I think that, and I hope that everybody else feels the same way. I think that this is so meaningful to get to talk to somebody. And I've heard you talk about this before too, about like whenever you're talking to somebody in a flow state, it's like you're actually talking to yourself. And I feel like me explaining how I feel about the things that you're talking about is getting me to really just think about all these new different dimensions of life in a way that I wouldn't have otherwise. And it's like it's cool because it's like this super trippy psychedelic feeling and that we get during conversations. And yeah, so just thank you a lot for coming on. This was great.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to listen to this podcast. I'm gonna put it on in the background and just do something.
Hey, and I mean, what are podcasts good for if not that? So
Yeah, exactly.